Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Final Trade. It's Low Effort Sunday, and today we're going to talk about EverQuest: The Hero's Journey. Now, this is an emulated server run by a third party. It is not run by Daybreak Games, and its big innovation is that you multi-class. You pick 3 classes for your character to play. So I'm going to lay a little bit of groundwork here. Whenever I talk about original EverQuest run by Daybreak Games, I'm going to call that EverQuest Classic. And my history in EverQuest is that back between 2003 and 2007, I played EverQuest Classic. This was the era of Gates of Discord, Omens of War, Dragons of Norath, Depths of Dark Hollow, POR, what was that one? I can't remember, and Serpent Spine. And I played a monk most of the time. My main was a monk. And in the last 2 years, my wife and I went back, we played EverQuest Classic for about 2 months until we were just like, yeah, we remember why we quit EverQuest. It gets too grindy at some point, and we got out of it again. The other thing that you notice if you go back to EverQuest Classic at this point is all of the 20-year-old bugs that Sony never fixed, that Daybreak Games has never fixed, that apparently they just have no will to fix. 20-year-old problems, 20-year-old bugs, 20-year-old pathing issues in the game, and they just won't fix them. The other really amazing thing from going back to EverQuest Classic in the last couple of years is the zone load times have not improved. 20 years, 20-year newer hardware that you're running on, and yet zone load times are as slow as they ever were. So in comes Hero's Journey. Now, this is the emulated server where you multi-class. You combine 3 classes into one character. The only race choice you have to make is you have to pick a race that's legal for one of the 3 classes. But, if you pick 3 classes, you're going to have a pretty good selection of the available races to pick just about any race you would want. Almost all of the content on Hero's Journey is soloable. It's balanced to be soloable. When you take 3 classes and you cram all of their AA abilities, all of their skills, all of their spells, all of their disciplines into one character, a whole lot of content suddenly becomes soloable. And you could think of this as EverQuest that respects your time. So if you want to play, you just get on and you just play by yourself. And when you have time, you play. And when you need to take a break, your kids start screaming at each other, you need to go make dinner or whatever else you need to do, you simply turn it off because you are playing by yourself. It's not like classic EverQuest where, you get on, you got to find 5 other people for a group, you got to travel somewhere, someone dies on the way, your group wipes, and 3 hours later you log off in disgust because you only gained a quarter of a level. It's not like that. It really does respect your time. And as you play it on the Hero's Journey server, you really notice more and more places where the developers have thought, how can we make this game less punishing and more convenient for the 2020s? Instead of making it a brutal game for the late 90s when the appetite for brutal MMOs was still there. So, like I said, almost all the content is soloable. Most raids are either solo or duo-able. So with 1 or 2 people, you can do most raids depending on how good your gear is, how many AAs you have. And like I said, it really respects your time. Every character from level 1 has the ability to instantly teleport to the bazaar as long as they're not in combat. And then they can use the same ability again to teleport back to wherever they were. So again, if you need to jump on to a meeting at work, you can just hit the button, teleport to the bazaar, and when your meeting's done and you want to come back and play some more, you hit the button again and you teleport back to the exact spot you were standing at to start with. You log into the bazaar, and essentially because of that, in 15 seconds, you can be back to wherever you were the night before playing. You don't have to try to find the group, try to get to a place, agree to where you're going, wait for everyone to show up. All of that nonsense, you simply log in when you have time, you hit the bazaar and back skill, and you're back to where you were the last time you were playing. Most named mobs, especially raid names, can be found on a 14-hour instance. And so you can get these non-respawning instances, they call them. And so those raid bosses will be up in those instances. So there's none of this camping and competing for raid spawns. You simply go to the zone and you spin up an instance, a non-respawning instance, and it's got the raid mobs you want to play against, and you get to go play against them. You can do respawning instances that have just a 2-hour lockout, which is not really a big deal. It's just to keep you from abusing instances. And you can play those by yourself if you just want to farm experience or you're looking for items or things like that. But essentially, you're not competing for camps. And so you can, if there's a particular camp you like, or you want to pull the entire zone down on yourself and AoE it to death, you can do that in a respawning instance by yourself. Every class gets a few class-defining AAs at level 1. And what the devs say is you shouldn't have to wait 30 or 40 levels before you feel like you're playing the classes that you chose. And so, for instance, if you add a bard class to your character, you get Fading Memories at level 1. Rangers get Endless Quiver at level 1. Because it's a class-defining ability, and they want you to feel like you're playing the classes that you chose from level 1. Also, in terms of respecting your time, it has account-based fast travel, which means there's waypoints in certain zones around the world. Not every zone has a waypoint in it, but if any character on your account tags that waypoint, goes and physically touches it, then every character on your account can teleport straight to it from the bazaar. And so it's simple. Here's travel that is set up in a simple way to make it quick and easy. And so you also have account locked progression. And what that means is that when you first start, you can go to a bunch of the zones in Antonica, but you have to kill Vox and Nagi to unlock Kunark. And then you have to kill 4 of the Kunark boss dragons to unlock Velius. You have to kill like 5 of the Velius bosses to unlock Luclin. You have to kill about 5 of the Luclin bosses to unlock Plains of Power. And then you have to finish Quorm to unlock, what would be after that, Gates of Discord. They haven't released Gates of Discord yet. They only released Plains of Power and added that to the server in the last several days. So you can see a lot of differences from Classic. They've also just fixed a lot of the problems. The server performance is much better than even Classic EverQuest is today. Less lag. The pathing is better because it's on an emulated background. The server is emulated. It's not Daybreak Games and previously Sony software. It's different software running in the background that has the pathing work better. Zone load times are much better. I already talked about that. But some of the things that it does that are really interesting when you talk about cramming 3 characters together is if the characters have overlapping AAs, they generally stack. The effects generally stack. And so an example of this is warriors have flurry AAs. So if you do a successful triple attack, then you will have a chance to do a flurry, which adds 2 additional attacks on top of that triple. Well, warriors have that ability, and monks have that ability. Well, if you choose warrior and monk as 2 of your 3 classes on a character, then you can get the warrior flurry AAs and the monk flurry AAs, and they stack. And so you just add together the chance of each of those individual classes flurrying. And so that kind of overlap happens in a lot of places. You know, Wizard has a lot of spell critical AAs, and Druid has some also. And if you played a Druid with a Wizard, you could get both of them, and they would overlap. So one of the things that it also does when you start combining classes together is it really turns on its head what are good classes and what are bad classes. And so, you know, in classic EverQuest, the worst class, bar none, hands down, no argument, is the Beast Lord. Poor Beast Lords, poor people who accidentally, unfortunately chose Beast Lord as character creation and played it for years. Beast Lord is a horrible class on Classic EverQuest. DPS is low, healing is non-existent, slows are really bad. The pet is of marginal use because basically pets die instantly in raids to whatever AoE the boss is putting out. Beast Lords are awful on Classic, but on Hero's Journey, where you can add him as the third class to a build, Beast Lords are one of the best classes because they bring a bunch of monk AA abilities, because a Beast Lord is a hybrid of a monk and a shaman. So it brings a bunch of monk AA abilities. It brings the ability to heal. Now, yes, it's still the same kind of bad heals that he had in Classic EverQuest, but it's a heal spell. And even just having a really bad heal spell is super powerful on this server because it can be the difference between being able to solo most bosses and not. And then the pets are much more useful on Hero's Journey than they are in Classic EverQuest. And so a Beast Lord becomes a really viable option as a third class for a lot of builds. Now, the opposite is also kind of true. In Classic EverQuest, Necromancers are really good. They're one of probably the two best solo classes up there with Enchanters. And very, very strong class. But on Hero's Journey, because it's designed for raid bosses to be solo affairs, trash mobs are basically just simple. I mean, most trash mobs will not give you a big challenge. And so they die too soon for it to be viable for you to stack a bunch of dots on them. And so Necros, with their focus on damage over time spells, really don't bring a lot. And in fact, you know, Necro builds are few and far between in the meta. They're very weak. And so it's kind of sad because I loved playing Necros in Classic EverQuest as kind of side characters for fun, but on Hero's Journey, Necros are just terrible. And so, like I said, the overlapping AAs make things really cool. They make it where there's a very wide, viable meta that you can play in. I haven't really seen someone claim that they made a build that was terrible. I think maybe if you combine something like Shadow Knight with Paladin with Warrior, so you took all three tank classes and you just mashed them together, that might be pretty bad. But again, Paladin brings some really basic heals. Shadow Knight has really good life taps, and you would be tanky as hell. So the worst part of that build would be that your DPS would be low, but you would probably be absolutely unkillable. And as for kind of how wide the meta gets, there was previously a build that was really popular. It was a pet build. So if you choose 3 pet classes, you get to have 3 pets. And each of those pet classes' unique pet buffs works on all 3 of your pets. So each of your 3 pets gets the 3 different pet buffs. And so when I first started playing about 6 weeks ago on this server, there was a build of Necro, Mage, and Beast Lord. So basically just take the 3 best pet classes, mash them together, get 3 pets, buff them to hell, and make a really, really powerful build out of it. And it was the single most popular build according to the developers when they would go and actually measure, you know, what of the 500 and I think 520 possible builds you can make, that was the single most popular one. But what you've seen over the last 6 weeks or so is a lot more people are making characters where they drop the Necro out of that build. They keep Mage and Beast Lord, but they add Enchanter because Enchanter brings better haste, it brings better slow, but it also brings Dire Charm. And so you get rid of all those Necro dot spells that weren't helping you anyway. You replace them with all the versatility of an Enchanter, and then you also get Dire Charm. So arguably the pet is better that you've replaced also. The first character I made was a Warrior Monk Bard because, you know, if you go back to Classic EverQuest, Monk is the most broken, overpowered class. You can do men's with a 30-second recharge. He's the tankiest class after the 3 plate tanks. He's up there tied for the highest DPS with rogues and berserkers. It really comes down to how hard is the person piloting the character and how good is their gear. So essentially tied for highest DPS, best tanking after the plate tanks on classic EverQuest, nigh unkillable. The survivability is incredible. And so you come over to Hero's Journey and you pick two other classes to go with it, and you say, okay, let's go Warrior, because Warrior has highest crit chance in the game. He has tankiness, he has flurry, and so it'll augment both the tanking and the DPS capabilities. And then Bard. Bard has a bunch of utility. Bard has Overhaste. Bard has AE Slow, AE Snare, AE Dots, things like that. And so that was the first character I made, because it's kind of like if I was going to take the classic EverQuest incredibly broken, overpowered monk and make him even more broken, what would I do? And so adding a warrior and a bard to that I thought was a good option. People have made viable archer builds, which is something you would never see in classic EverQuest. And so they take a ranger, a bard, and a cleric, and that makes a viable archer build where you have procs and things from the cleric, you have the bard overhaste, you have the ranger with endless quiver from level 1 and all the bow abilities that he gets, and it makes a really good archer build. And you can actually shoot a bow from 0 distance on Hero's Journey. You could take just any tank, any DPS, and any healer. Take those 3 classes and mash them together, and it would do great. You'd have tankiness, you'd have some DPS, and you'd have ability to heal. And just think, if you did Shaman, well, you would have your own haste, you'd have slows, you'd have some dots if they were ever made viable, you'd have heals, you'd have cures, you'd have all that versatility of Shaman, who's basically up there with like Enchanter in terms of all-around versatility in the game. But you could add that on top of any DPS and any tank. If you wanted, you could make a character that was all nukes. You put a wizard, a mage, and a druid. You get all of the stacking, AAs for spell damage, spell criticals, spell critical modifier, resist debuffs, all of those things together on one character, and then you have essentially the wizard's incredibly large nukes, and you have the mage's nuke procs that make your next nuke do a crit. You can combine those together and make a really, really powerful nuking character. You know, maybe someday dots will become part of the meta on this server. I don't really think so. I think if they wanted to do that, they could maybe make like a second server where essentially every mob is just like 4 times as hard, and then dot builds would become part of the meta. But if that ever happened, you could mash a necro and a shaman and a druid together into a character. You could make an ultimate utility character by just throwing an enchanter, a druid, and a shaman together. The 3 highest utility classes in the game, throw them together and you can do everything between those 3 classes. So those are just some kind of spitballing ideas. The second character I made was a Shadow Knight rogue wizard, and it's so much fun. The Shadow Knight has all kinds of life tapping, all kinds of life leeching. He's tanky. And then the rogue brings backstabbing for super high damage. He brings all kinds of melee DPS. He brings poisons. And then the wizard brings AE nukes, but he also brings spell damage and criticals to things like the Shadow Knight's life taps. So now the Shadow Knight's life taps get all the benefits from the wizard's spell damage and spell crit AAs. The rogue's poison procs get all of those benefits from the wizard's spell damage and spell critical AAs. And so they synergize together really, really well. And when you're life tapping using Mortal Coil on the Shadow Knight, well, when backstab comes up and you do a double 8k backstab, you life tap on that and essentially complete heal yourself. So that class has been incredibly fun because its ability to just stand and tank anything and self-heal through it is so huge. And the thing about this server is they really encourage you to experiment. They really don't want a stable meta to emerge. And so what they do is if you have several characters on your account, you get a bonus to your experience based on how long you've played those other characters. It's based on a formula around how many AA points they have. But essentially, if you have a bunch of late game characters with huge amounts of AA, and then you want to spin up another character just to try a different combo, they reward you for having had those other characters and make it simpler for you to just spin up and test new things. In terms of pay to win, it is not a microtransaction hellscape, thank God. There is a way you can give money to support the developers, and you get a currency they call Echoes of Memory. And then those currencies are used to buy a couple of convenience items in the game. Things like a bag that can automatically sell all at once, so you don't have to click every item to sell it. So there's a couple of things like that where you can use the Echoes of Memory just for convenience. You can use it to basically teleport people to your waypoints so you can share your waypoints with other people, which again is just a convenience thing so they don't have to run on their own and tag all the waypoints on their own account. And so that's the kind of stuff you get if you support the developers, if you give money to the people running the server. The other thing is you can use those Echoes of Memory to give buffs to the entire server. So instead of it being like pay to win, it's like pay for everyone to win. And so if you wanted to donate $20 to the people running the servers and you got some Echoes of Memory, there's a vendor you can give them to, and it'll charge up these server-wide buffs that everybody gets. So everybody gets to benefit from it. And then you get the social credit of being the guy who donated. So another thing that works is you just log on and have fun. Like I said, you just log in, you hit Bazaar and back to teleport back to where you were playing last time, and you can just start having fun again. You know, you never hit a point in playing in the 6 weeks I've been on this server. You never hit a point in playing where you think, you know, this is getting really grindy. I need to spin up a box to, you know, heal me, or a shaman box to heal and slow, or a mage box to add DPS. You never think that, because the way it is balanced is to keep it fun, to keep it as a mostly solo adventure. You don't have to group with anyone if you don't want to. There are bonuses if you want to. You'll get experience faster, but you don't have to. And so it's just a very nice environment. It's like they took everything from EverQuest that was grindy and terrible, and they very intelligently removed it and replaced it with better versions of the systems that are more fun. And just in general, the kind of vibe on the server is everyone's really nice. The general chat, everyone's always asking questions. You'll see the same question get asked over and over again. Nobody ever gets rude about it. Nobody ever gets, no one's just ever rude or mean or anything like that. It's a really great environment. And the other night, there were over 2,000 people actually playing. There were 3,000 accounts online, but some of those would have been Bazaar bots. So reasonably about 2,000 people playing. I doubt Daybreak Games gets 2,000 concurrent players on its servers anymore. So the last thing that I'll really say in praise of this is the install for it actually just works. I'll put a link to someone else's video down in the description of this. They had a video that basically shows how to go through the steps of installing. It was super easy, very clear, and it worked the first time, which when you're talking about things like emulated servers and stuff like that is not always the case. So, you know, if you played EverQuest in the past and you kind of miss it, but also you've gotten older and your propensity to deal with BS is just lower than ever, this is probably something you should give a try. You know, just think about 3 classes you want to mash together and just start playing it. Don't worry about whether you think it's going to be the best in the meta. It's probably still going to be fun. Let me know what you think, guys.